Welcome to the Mount Pleasant Magazine podcast, featuring discussions and interviews about the people, places, and events that make Mount Pleasant such a special place.
Hi, this is Roger Gaither, your host for the Mount Pleasant Magazine podcast. This week, Bill Macchio chats with new Mount Pleasant Town Council member John Iacofano. And now, here are Bill and John.
Here we are with another episode of Mount Pleasant podcast, and I'm so excited. We have a newly elected town council member. John, pronounce your last name, please.
Oh, it's Iacofano.
Iacofano. So John Iacofano, yes. And both their names end up with a vowel. So it surprises me. I have that kind of challenge with that. But John, you've lived here. I remember when I had a magazine called East Cooper Magazine, which morphed into Mount Pleasant Magazine. You had a restaurant in the Moultrie Plaza.
Correct.
And I know how hard you've worked. And you've raised your family here in Mount Pleasant all these years. How long have you guys lived here?
So my wife and I have lived here since 1999, and we have three children who are 17, 15, and 11. So born and raised in Mount Pleasant. And yes, I had a place over in the Moultrie Plaza. It was called Iacofano's, and just depended on what year or month you came. I was a pizza joint and I was a restaurant. And one day I decided to turn it into a high-end restaurant. So you came you were there for pizza on one Friday, and 2 weeks later you came in and it was a white tablecloth.
Yeah, so but I was looking at some of the reviews. You had great reviews, so people liked your cooking. Yeah,
we did well, but we were doing a lot of catering, and we've always done catering, and the catering took over. And it was more of a challenge to try to run a small mom and pop style restaurant and grow the catering, in which we've grown into 6 cities now. So hopefully one day again, we'll have a restaurant.
You're a hard worker, and I know that from our conversations. And so all 3 of your kids were born in Mount Pleasant?
Yes, all born in Mount Pleasant. Yes. East Cooper.
You have a question.
Correct.
In your mind there. In your heart of hearts, why did you run for city council?
I know Mount Pleasant has an opportunity to continue being the great town that it is. It's a great town to live in. It's a great place to raise your family, do business in. A lot of our decision making is kind of a windsock. We go extreme left, extreme right, a little too much. I'd like to see that settle down a little bit. I'd like to bring common sense, truth, transparency to town council, and to be able to provide the information to the citizens of Mount Pleasant, easy information, bring it transparency to let them know what's going on and what they need to be at, right? A lot of times, everybody shows up to the town council meetings to give their 2 minutes, which is great, but really you need to show up to the committee meetings. If there's another aspect that you need to be at. If you want to make a change, if you want to see a difference, a lot of the agenda comes from the committee. So we need to let the town and its residents know what's going on the committee side of things.
That's very good advice, John. If anybody, obviously I want people to get to know you, but
right.
If they take anything away from this dialogue between you and I, that's one of the things I like them to take away from. As you're preparing to run, and obviously you talk to your wife and your kids, what's the best advice you got?
Well,
is she over there? Are you looking at her right now?
I'm looking at my wife. She's over there working. When you say I talk to my wife and my kids, I kind of mentioned that I might run, and then I kind of mentioned that when I came home and said, "Oh, I just filed." So it wasn't like something
I would do, John.
Right?
Is that
wasn't
an Italian? Is that Italian heritage?
Yeah, it must be. It's kind of like you just shoot first, aim later type thing.
But
right?
what was the best advice you got when you were running? No matter who it was from. I'm not going to ask you who it was from, but what was the best advice?
The best advice that I received was when I won. And it was also the same type of advice that I was receiving when I ran, but it really hit home when I got elected. And that was a gentleman that was helping me out said, "I want you to write down why you ran. And I want you to bring that to every meeting you go to and every council every council meeting you go to, every time you vote, you bring that out and you read why you ran, so that you remember.
That's your mission statement.
Right. You look at your mission statement on why you ran and what you were telling the citizens of Mount Pleasant you were going to do for them. And you read that every time to remind you to not let anything go to your head, and to remind you what your mission for running was and what you're supposed to be accomplishing. And that really, I was being given that advice as I was going to, speak from the heart, vote from the heart, vote from your gut, listen to the people. But it really hit home after I was elected, and it was like, you know what? Right. Because it could easily get away from you. What your mission was could easily get away from you. And it was, it's just an honest conversation. You and I had a great honest conversation. There's nothing to hide. I'm going to tell you how I feel. You tell me how you feel, and we'll compromise, meet in the middle.
Everyone's talking about real estate. The conversation continues with Voice for Real Estate podcast. Listen and learn from the experts who call the Carolinas home. Podcast advertising gives your business a voice of authority. Be heard. Advertise on this podcast.
You're listening to the Mount Pleasant Magazine podcast.
Transparency is key to any success, in my opinion. We just talked about earlier about your restaurant, and if you go to your website, people can see how many locations you have. I love the niche you're in for catering, but in growing the business, making it happen, being prosperous in that fashion, what elements are you going to take from that experience to improve our city?
First thing we have to do is we have to listen to the experts, right? I mean, we're 9 members of town council listening to 93,000 citizens, but we have 500 very intelligent, well-versed, experienced employees in the town of Mount Pleasant who know what we need as well. So I'm going to use the word compromise again. We've got a compromise between understanding what the citizens want and understanding to listen to the employees of Mount Pleasant, especially listen to them on what they've seen and the impacts that can be had in the town on our decision making. We really need to look as much as we can. We need to look as far as we can to what the cause and effects of our decisions are going to make. Take the plastic ban, for example. Who would have ever thought that all we would have done is caused thicker plastic bags to be created, right? We have a plastic ban, and some stores have, instead of getting rid of plastic bags, we created reusable plastic bags that are 10 times or more as thick as the thank you bags that were being thrown out. So, look at that cause and effect. If you want to use that as an example, did we get the best outcome possible?
Listening to the town employees is important because they've been there, they've done it. Can you give us another example of how you're going to leverage your past experience in business to improve our town?
We've got to look at smart growth and understand that growth is happening in Mount Pleasant. It's people want to live here. What can we do to make sure that we are bringing the right resources to the town and headed in the correct direction and creating the right foundation? This is probably my best business experience. I had 3 locations. I had Charleston, Columbia, and Charlotte, and they were running great. And I could jump in a car and run to Charlotte and be a delivery driver, right? Or I could run up there and go wash dishes, or I could run up there and help with a big catering. It's 3 hours away, no problem. Then we had the opportunity to open up Philadelphia, and we opened up Philly, and it started out great. First 3 months were great. And then we started kind of spiraling a little bit out of control. We weren't succeeding to the level we want to succeed. Our service was not what we expected it to be and what allowed us to grow and what the customer was expecting. And we couldn't figure it out. And we said, we've got 3 locations. And the problem is we run our company like we have 3 locations. We don't run our company like we have 4 locations or like we have 10 locations. You have to run your company for what you want to be or what you're going to be. So that when that happens, you're ready for it. If you run your company with the structure that you have 10 locations, when you open up number 4, when you open up number 5, when you open up number 6, you're ready for it because you've been running it with that structure. We've got to remember that when I moved here in 1999, there was about 45,000 people here, 45,000 citizens. Now there's about 93,000. We're slated to have about 125,000, I believe, citizens. We've got to run the town of Mount Pleasant. We've got to prepare it like we have that 125,000 citizens. People say, "Oh, John, you're pro-growth." Well, I'm pro-reality. That's what's going to happen. That's what the studies have shown. You can't close the door. There's going to be about 125,000 citizens of Mount Pleasant, and that's what we have to run it like.
I think, John, that's very, very good advice. I think it's true with any business. Run it like you want it to be, not what it is. So Will Haney, I want to go into the committees for a little bit, if I could here.
Okay.
Will Haney, one of his duties his responsibility as a mayor is to assign each one of the council members to committees. And
Correct.
You were assigned the education committee and also the accommodation tax committee. Could you give the viewers and listeners of Mount Pleasant podcast an idea of what those committees are and how you would contribute to those committees?
ATAC is the hospitality tax committee. So we collect hospitality tax, and then there's a certain percentage that has to be used back into the town, it's called heads and beds, basically, right? How can we advertise, promote, take some of that hospitality tax dollars, 2%.
If I may, John, I speaking of transparency, I want everybody to know that's listening or tuned in here that Mount Pleasant Magazine does receive funds from the accommodation tax money and has before you were there and continue to, because the town feels like Mount Pleasant Magazine can generate additional revenue through the accommodation tax. I just want to put that out there, John.
Yeah, that's great. And listen, and we worked together. That's how we met. We worked because, to me, we had a great little ad in there, and then you and I worked together to put a better ad, because I want to make sure that if you're receiving ATAC money, which you are, the hospitality, the accommodations tax money, to promote the hotels in Mount Pleasant, which would in turn promote more hospitality taxes, which would, this never-ending positive cycle that we're looking for of producing more revenue for the town and for its businesses. We worked together and we worked on the ad, and we want you to be successful with that ad.
One of the reasons I wanted to bring you on, because I wanted people to get to know you, but something that you said earlier in the podcast that it is so true. You have a very strong personality. You have a very strong voice. And usually people that have that strength that you have are not pliable. They're not flexible. And what I find intriguing about you, as strong as your voice is, and has as powerful as a personality you have, you are still very flexible in the way you approach things, which means you're likely to be more successful because it's about compromise.
I appreciate that, and
it's true.
But you did the work too. Look at the ad now. So hopefully we're gonna keep that relationship going. Yeah. Right? It's better. Yeah. I mean,
but awesome. Tell us how you're going to guide the accommodation tax and what that means to our community as well as the education work.
Well, I mean, it's compromise, it's understanding, it's listening, and it's just being truthful. It's like this is money. And what we're doing with our money, we're expecting a return on investment. And so what is the return on investment? There's money that goes to the bridge run. There's money that goes to surf soccer club events. There's a golf event that the ATAC money goes to. There's a couple things that don't necessarily correlate to the highest return of heads and beds, but it correlates to the culture of Mount Pleasant, in which people, they're coming to Mount Pleasant for the culture, for the experience. So there might be some ATAC money that goes to a heritage, to a culture, a way of life of Mount Pleasant that might not necessarily return the heads and the beds or the revenue, but returns to the feeling of Mount Pleasant, which is important. We want to create a certain feeling and culture in Mount Pleasant. So there, I think we need to try to expand those dollars. And we need to make sure that those dollars are getting the greatest return on investment possible. The more dollars you create, the higher it's going to be.
Absolutely. Regarding the education, because education in any community makes a strong foundation.
Right.
What will you be doing with that committee?
The first thing I need to do is, so I'm the chair of the education committee, and the education committee was originally created to bridge the gap between the Charleston County School District and the town of Mount Pleasant. That gap has been bridged. There seems to be a great relationship going. So the reactive part is gone. So when you're not in a reactive state, it doesn't mean you get to sit idle. You've got to go proactive, or you will be reactive again. So we need to create a proactive dialogue between the town of Mount Pleasant and the schools. So when it comes to creating an agenda, I have to first meet with all the principals to have them help me create the agenda. And happy to listen to the citizens of Mount Pleasant, which I've put out a couple things, and I've had some emails come back on what the citizens feel that we can assist in. A couple things. I've met with about 4 principals so far, and I have a bunch more meetings lined up. One thing was a simple one. I mean, I was at Whitesides. And there's baseball fields behind Whitesides, and they took me out back and they said, listen, this is town parking back here. This is the town parking lot. It's to support the baseball fields, but our teachers park back here, and the lights aren't on at 6 o'clock in the morning, and they're not on at 6:30 at night when the 6 o'clock at night when the teachers leave. Is there anything we could do about that? So I gave Andy a call, and Andy Weiss a call, and let him know. And we've got new LED lights ordered, and we're gonna change the timers on it. So that's micro, right? That doesn't seem like a big deal. That's a micro thing. But all these micros end up being a macro, right? How do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. So how can the town create a better space for the schools to be in? What can we do? We use fields, and we maintain 2 fields that are the school districts. I believe it's up by Cario, their fields, and Mount Pleasant Middle School. So those are Charleston County fields that we maintain and are able to use. Is there more opportunity there as we look for more field space? Field space and the rec department are a big deal. And we need more field space for our children in Mount Pleasant. We need to have kids outside, and nothing worse than looking at a perfectly empty baseball field or soccer field or lacrosse field, and we're crammed on town fields, but then there's a field sitting across the street that's just empty, that's owned by Charleston County School District. So can we create some dialogue there where those fields are able to be used? So I have, like I said, I've only met with about 3 or 4, I think it's 4. And arts, can the town create, can we become more involved in cultural arts with the schools, and how can we aid in that? Communication. So I'm talking to the different schools. I think we're going to have the Charleston County School District set up a table once a month at the farmers market, so we can let the citizens of Mount Pleasant know what's coming up. One big issue, these seem like small issues, but one large issue to the schools is last minute signups for pre-K and kindergarten, right? Especially if it's your first child. You don't know when the sign up is, and all of a sudden, oh my gosh, I've got to get my kid in.
John, was that your idea to have the Charleston County School District at the farmers market?
Yeah, that's my idea. Yeah, let's
awesome.
Let's have an informational. What's the topic of the month? Right.
Sully Whitty is there. Who used to be the editor of the Moultrie News for many, many years.
Right.
She'd be almost like a celebrity there if you got her to come. Hey, I wanted to ask you a question, and I'm so impressed by all this you're talking about because it takes time, and time is money. So I very much commend you for what you're doing. What have you learned since you've been there? How many town council meetings have you been to so far?
2.
Okay. What have you learned? What's your takeaway from those 2 meetings?
Let me look at my card of transparency and truth and common sense real quick.
Well, I know you tell the truth, dude. I know that.
There's a lot of things that need to be looked into before you get to those meetings. And we have got to have conversations. It's a difficult situation you're in, right? Because if you're on the education committee, if you're on town council, the minute you have a majority, it becomes a quorum and it has to be public knowledge, which is great. It's fine. But I think that's awesome. That should be done. But you can't just gather 5 town council members to have a discussion on what's what's coming up. So a lot of times, the first time that me and another town council member or a group of the town council, obviously the 9 of us up there might be having a conversation about something, is right there at town council. And in the business world where I'm in, when I want to know something, I just pick up the phone and make a phone call. And if I want to get 5 people on a Teams meeting real quick, then I just say, hey, all right, Teams meeting, 11 o'clock, let's discuss this. And that's
it's more fluid.
It's way more fluid. Right. Thank you for that. It's definitely more fluid. So it's more difficult to have those conversations because it has to be so formal, which I agree with. It has to be out there in the public. You can't be doing things behind closed doors. It needs to be out there, but you can't just say, hey, can we all get on a phone call 11 o'clock? Let's talk about this. If we could create something more fluid where that dialogue can be, maybe we'll work on that. That dialogue could go live and be recorded and be on the town website or something like that. Notes can be taken. That would be wonderful, because that's probably the most difficult thing is the first discussion that I might be having with somebody is right there, 2 seconds before the vote.
John, what I really hear you saying when it pertains to that is that the important decisions that have to be made have to have consideration and have to have more time spent to it. And so our town needs to spend the time necessary. I want to thank you for being here on Mount Pleasant Podcast. My feeling is the town will benefit from your contribution, and certainly the time that you spent. My experience with you is the time that you spent there. And my first email about you came from Lori Sims, of course, and because she was talking to me about the accommodation tax money. And I was very impressed with the time that you spent trying to figure it out. And you're doing the same thing with the education committee. So I appreciate your time here on Mount Pleasant Podcast, and I look forward to seeing what you do to improve our city. Thanks for being here.
Thank you, Bill. I appreciate you having me. I look forward to working with you and everybody else in the town. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for spending your time with the Mount Pleasant Magazine Podcast. Your community, your podcast. Listen to past and future episodes at mountpleasantpodcast.com.